Love found me at 60. My name's Margaret. I'm 60 years old, and for most of my life, I thought my story was finished. I'd been a wife, a mother, a teacher. I'd lost, I'd grieved, I'd learned to be content with quiet mornings and empty rooms. Then one day, love found me again, not the kind that sweeps you off your feet, but the kind that reminds you you're still alive. The quiet years. When people talk about retirement, they make it sound like freedom. But for me, freedom felt a lot like silence. After my husband David passed away 8 years ago, our house in Austin became too big for one person. Every room echoed with memories, his coffee mug still on the shelf, the dent in the sofa where he used to sit, his old flannel jacket hanging by the door. I told myself I liked the peace, the predictability. But truthfully, the silence became another companion, one that never left. My days blurred together, morning coffee, newspaper, gardening, phone calls with my daughter Claire, and volunteering at the library twice a week. I smiled when people asked how I was doing, but deep down, I felt like I was just marking time. That changed the summer I met Ethan. To the house that needed fixing. The porch railing had been loose for months, and my neighbor recommended a young contractor named Ethan Rivera. He's polite, honest, and he doesn't overcharge, she said. When he arrived that Tuesday morning, I expected someone middle-aged, maybe with a clipboard and paint-stained jeans. Instead, a tall man in his early 30s stepped out of a dusty pickup, carrying a toolbox and a smile that could warm a cold room. "Mrs. Hale?" he asked, tipping his cap. "Just Margaret," I corrected, already amused. He laughed softly. "Then Margaret it is." He spent the morning tightening screws, sanding wood, and humming under his breath. The sound filled the air like sunlight. When he took a break, I brought him lemonade, the kind I still made the way David liked it, extra tart. "You don't have to do that," he said. "I know," I replied, "but I miss having someone to make it for." He smiled, and I realized how long it had been since someone looked at me, really looked, without pity. 3 small conversations. Over the next few weeks, Ethan returned to repair the fence, fix the gutter, and help paint the front steps. We talked while he worked, about his dog Milo, his mom, who lived in San Antonio, my years of teaching 2nd grade, and the best breakfast tacos in town. He had a way of listening that made you forget the years between you. Sometimes he'd ask about David, and I'd find myself talking more than I intended. "You must have loved him a lot," he said once. "I did," I answered. "He was my calm in the storm." Ethan nodded, thoughtful. "Sounds like you were lucky to have that kind of love." "I was," I said, "but luck runs out." He shook his head. "Maybe it just changes shape." Something in his tone stayed with me all day. The garden. By late summer, Ethan had finished the repairs, but he kept stopping by to check if the fence was holding, or if the roses survived the heat. One Saturday morning, he showed up with gardening gloves and a pack of seeds. "Thought your garden could use some color," he said. We spent the afternoon planting marigolds and lavender. He worked in the sun without complaint, sleeves rolled up, dirt streaking his arms. For the first time in years, my yard sounded alive again. Shovels scraping, birds calling, the low rhythm of conversation. At one point, I looked up and caught him smiling at nothing in particular, just enjoying the day. That smile hit me like a memory I didn't know I'd lost, of simple joy. When he left that evening, I stood on the porch, watching his truck disappear down the road, and whispered, "Thank you, whoever you are." 5 whispers of change. People in small neighborhoods notice things. Soon, my friend Nora, from down the street, started asking questions. "Who's that handsome man fixing your yard?" she teased. "Just a contractor," I said, too quickly. She raised an eyebrow. "Contractors don't usually bring flowers." I laughed it off, but inside, I felt a strange mix of embarrassment and warmth. It wasn't romance, at least, not in the way people assume. It was something quieter, a friendship that made me feel seen again. But feelings have a way of growing roots when you least expect them. 6. The music festival. One Friday, Ethan knocked on my door, holding 2 tickets. "I have an extra for the Zilker Park Music Fest," he said. "My buddy bailed. Come with me." I almost refused. Crowds weren't my thing anymore, but he looked so hopeful that I couldn't say no. That evening, we sat on a blanket, under the Texas sky, surrounded by laughter, lights, and the smell of barbecue. He handed me a soda, and when our fingers brushed, I felt a spark. Not romantic, but alive. "Thank you for bringing me," I said. "I haven't been out like this in years." He grinned. "You should do it more often. Life's too short to watch from the sidelines." The words lingered. Life's too short. When he dropped me off later, he said, "Good night, Margaret. Same time next week. I'll check the porch lights." I nodded, smiling. "I'll make lemonade." 7. The letter. One morning, a letter arrived from my daughter Claire. She was worried. "Mom, are you spending too much time with that young man? People might talk." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. When I told Ethan later, he looked hurt. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said quietly. "You didn't," I replied. "People just don't understand friendship when it doesn't fit their idea of normal." He hesitated. "You're one of the best friends I've ever had, Margaret. I hope that's okay to say." I smiled, though my throat felt tight. "That's more than okay." Still, that night, I couldn't sleep, because for the first time I realized how much his presence had changed my world, and how empty it might feel if he ever left. 8. The storm. In late September, a heavy storm swept through Austin. Power lines fell, trees broke, and for 2 days the city was a mess of flashing lights and flooded streets. I tried to be brave, but when the thunder cracked over the roof, I jumped like a child. Then came a knock on the door. Ethan stood there, drenched, flashlight in hand. "Figured you might need help," he said. He spent the night on my couch, setting up candles and keeping the generator running. We talked for hours, about his dreams, my fears, and the strange comfort of unexpected company. At one point, I said, "You're too young to be spending your Friday night with an old lady like me." He chuckled. "You're not old, you're wise, and besides, you make better coffee than anyone my age." I laughed, but something in my chest loosened. For the first time in years, I wasn't lonely. 9. The goodbye. We didn't plan. A few weeks after the storm, Ethan told me he'd been accepted into an artist-in-residence program in Santa Fe. It was exactly what he'd been dreaming about since the day we met. But my smile faltered when he said the words. "That's wonderful," I managed. He studied my face. "You'll be okay here?" "Of course," I said. "The house doesn't need much fixing anymore." He nodded slowly. "Then I guess I did my job." The night before he left, he stopped by with a gift, a small painting of my garden, sunlight breaking through clouds. "Whenever you look at this," he said, "remember that everything you plant keeps growing, even when you don't see it yet." I hugged him. It felt like hugging summer itself. When his truck disappeared down the street, the silence returned, but this time it felt different, not empty, just waiting. 10 letters from Santa Fe. Every few weeks a letter arrived, messy handwriting, bits of desert sand caught in the folds. He wrote about painting in the early morning light, about missing Texas tacos, about the stray cat that had adopted him. I wrote back about the library, the garden, and the way the marigolds had exploded into color. Sometimes his letters ended with, "You'd love it here," and I'd smile because maybe I would. Claire noticed the envelopes once and said, "He writes to you a lot." I only said, "It's nice to have a friend who remembers you." 11. When the garden bloomed again. Spring came earlier than usual that year. I spent mornings kneeling in the soil, hands dirty, sun warming my neck. Every time a new flower pushed through, I thought of Ethan's words, "Everything you plant keeps growing." The neighborhood kids started calling me Miss Maggie the gardener. I laughed, feeling 10 years younger each time. One afternoon, as I watered the lavender, I realized I hadn't felt lonely in months. Grief had softened into gratitude. I'd begun teaching painting classes at the community center, using the brushes Ethan left behind. Somehow, life had found its color again. 12. The call in late May. The phone rang. It was Ethan's mother. Her voice trembled as she told me he'd been in a car accident returning from an art fair in Taos. He didn't make it. The world tilted. I thanked her, hung up, and sat on the floor, hands pressed to the painting he'd given me. For a long time I didn't cry. I just breathed, trying to believe the air could still fill my lungs. That evening I walked outside. The sky was orange and soft, the kind of color he used to say looked like hope. And then I cried, not the sharp grief I'd known when David died, but something deeper, almost peaceful, because this time I knew love had not been taken from me, it had been given. 13. The exhibit months later, a package arrived from New Mexico. Inside was an invitation, and a letter from the art program director. Ethan's final series of paintings was being shown, landscapes of Texas, and small portraits of people he'd met, including one labeled Margaret in Spring. I flew to Santa Fe for the opening. Standing among strangers, I stared at the painting of my garden, vivid yellows and purples bursting against a twilight sky. He had captured every flower exactly as it had bloomed that last summer. For the first time, I didn't feel old. I felt infinite, like something beautiful had passed through me and left its mark on the world. 14 letters unsent back home. I began writing letters I'd never send. To Ethan, to David, sometimes to the woman I used to be. I told them about the new students in my class, about the cat that wandered into my yard, about how the marigolds still came back stronger each year. One line kept returning to me: love doesn't end, it just changes hands. I pinned his painting above my desk. Every morning, before starting the day, I whispered, "Thank you." 15. Now it's 2025. I'm 61 years old, and my life is nothing like I expected, which is exactly why it's wonderful. On weekends, I lead a small art and gardening group for retirees and students. We meet under the old oak tree, paintbrushes and laughter mingling in the sun. Sometimes, a breeze carries the scent of lavender, and I imagine Ethan somewhere smiling at the chaos of colors we create. People ask if I ever fell in love again. I tell them, yes. I fall in love every time something new blooms, because love found me once through a kind young man with paint on his hands and light in his heart, and it keeps finding me, in every sunrise, every student's smile, every seed that dares to grow. My name's Margaret. I thought my story was over at 60, but then life sent me a reminder that love can appear in the shape of friendship, kindness, or a helping hand. It doesn't always stay forever, but it always leaves something beautiful behind.